Oh, good evening, stream watchers. Hold on a moment. I have to get a drink. All right. Let's pick up the mic. Good evening, everybody. This is W2NDG in Highland, New York. About to start the Sunday night OMARC Science and Technology Net. First, let's see if there's any priority or emergency traffic. If there is, please come now. All right, nothing heard. So once again, this is Neil, W2NDG, with the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. We meet here every Sunday night on the OMARC repeater, the 805 from Overlook Mountain, and discuss things related to science and technology. A very broad topic. Can cover almost anything. Frequently, we cover non-ham radio things, but a lot of what we talk about does relate back to ham radio. So, usually we get together here with my sidekick and friend Jim, K2BHM. Jim has been under the weather on and off a little bit, as some of us know, and he may or may not be with us tonight. If not, that's fine. But we're keeping things kind of light through the summer here anyway, not getting into any really, really heavy subjects again until the fall, where we'll pick up again with our tour of the radio spectrum and some other things that we've put on hold. So let me drop for a moment. So first I'm going to see if Jim is here, and if he is, I'll put him at the top of the list for check-ins, and then I want to talk a little bit about the subject I posted tonight, which doesn't have to be what we talk about, it's just a suggestion. So Jim, are you with us tonight? K2BHM, please come down.
I'm here, not sure how long, but K2BHM. And I didn't catch on what was the topic.
All right, welcome, Jim. And the topic tonight I listed as questions without answers. And I said in the post on Facebook, looking for your stories about unanswered questions. And K2GOG has already commented on it, saying I look confused and angry. Well, that's the whole point, Steve. I was trying to look confused and angry because we all have been in that situation where we've had questions that weren't properly answered. Let's look for them, or a story about that, because your question may have been answered years later, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. So that's what tonight's topic is. Jim, anything on that?
Yeah, the most obvious topic would be results in politics, but we don't want to go there.
No, that would be endless, and you know, topics like that would go all the way back through the history of this country's politics. The strange happenings of late are not unique, really. But we won't go in that direction. We prefer not to. I have one specific example, which is kind of interesting. I've done a little bit of research on it, but I'm still not 100% sure of my answer. But one of the things that's changed has to do with the internet. And years ago, those of us of a certain age who graduated high school when there was no internet, and those of us who are like myself, I consider myself to be an information addict. I like to know about things. I like to know how things work. When I look at things, I like to know what's going on with them. How did they get there? Why are they there? Why do they do what they do? The internet was a miracle for a lot of us, even though not everything you look up on the internet is correct, which is another problem we see these days. But it's still, if you know proper research techniques, it's a way to get the answers to a lot of your questions. But because of the way things are structured, there are certain questions that are very hard to answer. Things dealing with similar words and phrasings and all sorts of things. Learning how to do research correctly on the internet is a big thing, and people don't always understand what that means. They say, well, I know how to Google stuff. Well, and my question to that statement is, do you? Do you really? I mean, any of us can type a bunch of words into Google, but do you know how to use the advanced features? Do you know how to exclude words or guarantee that these two words will only appear in this order together and both of them instead of either of them? Things like that. There's all sorts of tricks you can play to get your answers. So maybe we'll touch on that a little bit. Let me drop. Before I get into what prompted my thoughts on this, my particular question that wasn't answered, let me throw it back over to Jim again to see if he has anything for this.
Well, I'm waiting for your question, but let me pose an interesting conundrum. When you see a rabbit hole, there's no mound of dirt around it. How did the rabbit make a hole without pulling up a bunch of dirt? Well, the obvious answer is he started down below and came up. Well, how did he get down below?
It's because you're looking at the Gazada.
Yeah, something like that. I know when bees make a hive underground, there's always two entrances. So you plug one, you think you got it, and they surprise you.
And sometimes it's just the way they're built. Certain animals have evolved to do things that we don't realize if you really watch closely. Carpenter bees don't eat wood, but they're very good at burrowing in it. They make a better hole than most of us can drill.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen enough Bugs Bunny cartoons to know that you never want to take that left turn at Albuquerque.
Although for some post-hole digging, I wouldn't mind having a Tasmanian devil around, right? All right, so you want that question, huh?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, this requires a little setup. So what is a spark? There's multiple definitions to that. So an electrical spark is usually when electrical potential between 2 points that are not conducting becomes so great that the electricity can jump across an air gap or a dielectric gap. Examples: lightning, Jacob's ladder, and other, scary-looking things from the old Frankenstein movies. Working with electricity in our shops on our workbenches. Getting wires close enough together with some electrical potential that you'll get a spark. That's an electrical spark. A hot spark is something different. So a hot spark is usually involving a piece of superheated metal or something. It doesn't have to be metal and conductive, but the way sparks can get confusing is that sometimes a hot spark can be caused by electric charges or electrical potential. But sparks release a certain amount of energy. whether they're electrical sparks or hot sparks, they release energy in the form of light because we see the spark. That's one of the things that identifies it as a spark. They release energy in the form of heat. So enough sparks, and yes, you do feel heat from them. Sparks release energy in the form of kinetic energy. And how is that? Well, a spark moves the air molecules around it, kinetic energy. And the result of that is sound. Sound energy is kinetic energy, but that's why when we spark something or a spark occurs, we hear that crack, that spark noise. So we have electrical sparks, we have hot sparks. All right? That's part of the setup. Let me drop. Electrical sparks release RF energy. We know this. This isn't theorized, spark gap transmitters. That was the whole point of them. The early methods of transmission used sparks to generate RF energy. If you have something sparking or arcing within your home, you'll hear it on an AM radio. So, you go up to an old-fashioned light switch and move it very, very, very slowly to that point where it's just making contact, and you'll hear that zzz coming from inside of your switch. Well, if you have an AM radio nearby at the time you're doing that, you'll hear it on the AM radio. So electrical sparks produce RF energy. Let me drop. Hot sparks can produce RF energy, depending on what's generating them. As we were saying, sometimes you can get hot sparks from electricity. Arc welding, good example. Other forms of welding are definitely producing hot sparks from electricity. So is the spark itself actually producing RF energy? The generation of the spark is. So it's a slightly different phenomenon. Okay, so let me get to the final part of this and then the question that I asked. 4th of July, we go to the fireworks show and we watch things go off and go up into the air, and a lot of them spark. They're beautiful. They throw all these lovely little sparks all over the place, or the kids are running around with sparklers in the backyard. And many types of fireworks produce colored sparks. They're sparks. They're hot sparks, but they are sparks, and they're sparks because they sparkle. They definitely produce that effect, and you hear that noise. So my question for an engineer that one night on another Science and Technology Net was, after everything that I've explained, do fireworks produce any RF energy? And it was an unanswered question. Let me throw it to Jim.
Well, that totally depends. When you excite electrons from one energy level to another, and then they relax back to the previous, they exude, they put out the energy that put them there in the first place. So it depends on what you're looking at. You excite certain electrons in neon, and it basically, when they regenerate back to their original level, they give off certain photons. Certain things have certain energy levels, and it depends on how you excite them and what the stable energy levels are as to what energy they're going to get back off. In the case of like a spark out transmitter, you've got all different things there, energized to all different levels, and it can give off all different reactions. But if you take something like neon or helium or krypton or whatever, they're very defined bands. And one of the things about the helium neon laser was that you take these two elements and you you excite them, and when they recite or relax back to their states, they give off a certain energy, and you put that in a bandpass filter, and it only amplifies and emits what is in the pass filter, which happens to be a common level for both of those elements. So it's very elemental dependent, and sorry, timeout. It depends on the atoms that you're exciting and what they're going to do when they relax back to their normal states.
So you're heading down the same road, I think, that the person I originally asked did, and the basic answer that I got that night was, we think so. You know, if you were able to capture, a type of fireworks that puts out a lot of sparks at a close range, somehow have the ability to capture RF closely, you probably would get a very small amount of RF energy out of it, but not as much as you would get out of an electrical spark. But what was interesting is that when I attempted to research it, there was really no information on this. As far as the specific example, and like you were saying, you could definitely put the pieces together of the pieces of this technology and say, okay, well, theoretically it should happen. But it was just interesting. That was one of those subjects that just didn't exist. And part of the reason may be because nobody's crazy enough other than me to ask the question. So, but this is what I was talking about today. I was just thinking about, points in our life that we may have asked a question that nobody could answer, or we asked a question that we never knew the answer to until the internet existed, or anything like that. So that's what I'm looking for tonight. How's that sound, Jim?
Yeah, sounds good. Basically, your solution is relatively simple. You have to look at all of the elements that are there, and what the electron levels are, and what the energy state levels are. And when they translate from a level they were excited to the next lower level, they will give off a certain particular wavelength, be that light, RF, X-rays, or whatever. So if fireworks happen to have something that has a certain particular energy level in the electrons, it'll produce RF as well as X-rays, IR, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's like I said, you take the components and you can come up with this on your own. But this is something. This is like a paper someone would write. I don't know why anybody would write one on this particular subject. Once again, this is how my brain works. We were doing this a couple of weeks ago when I talked about the water fountain problem in my head, and I didn't feel so odd about it when Steve told us that he used to run a spreadsheet counting M&Ms. So, all right, let's get some check-ins here. So anybody who's on tonight wants to participate, you can give me your call sign, your name, and your location. Call sign, name, and location, please come now.
WA2, RKN, Jerry, Hyde Park, and well, this is K9 GPT John, Hopo Junction, and I will be auditing the net tonight. answer is KB2, GGS Math Kernel. This is KB2, Romeo Whiskey, Bob, Oval.
All right, we've had 4 check-ins. John, you said you're auditing, so I'm guessing you're not looking for a grade on tonight's class. Anyway, all right. So, John, I assume you mean that I'm going to skip you in the rotation here? Yeah, I'll take that as a yes. Okay. So, and once again, if you have something else you wanted to bring up tonight, that's fine. I'm just looking to see if anybody else ever asked the question that there was no answer to, or they weren't satisfied with the answer, or had to really do a lot of hard research to come up with that answer. My examples of how we do this with the internet and what we did before the internet, anything along those lines. It's a very fluid topic tonight. So let's start at the top with Jerry. Jerry, do you have anything that fits these topics, or do you have something else you wanted to talk about?
Got a couple, but we'll see how many I can remember as we go along here. First, a brief comment about the intro stuff. I'm going to say that RF is electromagnetic energy. So if you can see it by eye, it's given off light, which is electromagnetic. So yeah, fireworks give off electromagnetic energy. Now, whether you're positing that RF is the limited piece of the electromagnetic spectrum, that's another issue. I was once positing what the impedance of the universe was. Occasionally, like yourself, I get really, really interested in very strange topics. I went down that rabbit hole for a little bit, had real good time with that. Way too arcane back then.
Oh, that produced a laugh in me, because I'm sitting here thinking, it's like we'll be measuring that in the, petaohms, exaohms, or would it not be a huge value because you're dealing with, totaling something up as a whole? Interesting, very interesting. There's an author I've read. I get the feeling you probably know of him, but I'm going to look it up here real quick while I throw it back to you for comment.
I didn't think that it would produce that strong a reaction. I was thinking of the concept of, what is the impedance of the fabric of space, if you will. And that was what I was pursuing. But I suppose it's also related, the entire universe or multiverse or whatever the heck it is. Authors you may be chasing, I don't know, but it's sci-fi vein. It would be Niven and Asimov. I've thoroughly enjoyed. Romped all over their material. W.H. back to that.
I was thinking of Stephen Baxter specifically and his Manifold series, which gets into a lot of the heavy science at a universal level. The first book being the one I think I've actually finished cover to cover, Manifold Time, which is an interesting trip to the end of time and back. Definitely a cool book. I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Baxter at all.
I have read him many years ago at this point in time. However, I believe it was a series of 3 trilogy, Vacuum Manifold. I may be thinking of a different author and series, but did this begin with the opening paragraph, Earth's sun explodes?
I don't think so. It's been probably over a decade since I've read it. But it's manifold time, manifold space, and manifold origin. And then they tack a short story collection onto it as well. But those are the 3 books: Manifold Time, Manifold Space, and Manifold Origin. What's interesting is they deal with the same main character and some of the other supporting characters as well. And it's just a retelling of a very basic theme in 3 ways. But the Manifold Time one takes you through time and the interconnectedness of some of it, and it's a very interesting look at the intelligence of squids. I know people who aren't into this stuff are listening to this saying, "Oh my God, what is he talking about?" But if you really enjoy scientific writing like that, it was excellent. I enjoyed it. Probably my favorite science-oriented sci-fi writer would be Greg Bear. Really like his stuff, although his later stuff got a little too scientific. Some of my favorite novels are his. So anyway, back to you for one more comment, and then we'll head down to Matt. So Jerry, comment, and then we'll move on.
WA2R again for ID. Know the authors you mentioned, read their stuff, and others as well. Sounds as though you and I have a discussion about some literature offline. Don't want to derail on that here. Other than that, let's move on. WA2R again, back to that.
You're right, and this is W2NDG on the OMARC Science and Technology Net. And I realized here, sitting here, that's one thing I haven't really talked to a lot of the OMARC people that we chat with on a regular basis about, and that is our fondness for sci-fi other than movies and Star Trek. Yes, Greg Bear. And I always tell people he is the author of my favorite End of the World story, and one of the scariest novels I've read from a scientific point of view is his novel about an intelligent disease. Crazy stuff. All right. John is auditing, so on to Matt. KB2GGF. Matt, anything on the subject of unanswered or poorly answered questions?
Well, you all raised some questions in my mind. If you're trying to find the space, are you looking perhaps to excite space? What would be its fundamental frequency? Where does it resonate? Interesting questions that I don't know if I'll have an answer, but that's okay. I can't figure everything out. Guy trying. But yeah, the only question, and it has nothing to do with technology or anything else, but dogwood tree. Why is it called dogwood? I've never been able to find that out, and I've wondered since I was 3 years old. Back to that.
Interesting. That is a good one. I'll have to Google that while somebody else is talking here. And yeah, Jerry can enlighten us more as to where he was heading with that question. But what's funny is that if you punch into Google, what is the impedance of the universe, you get an answer. And apparently it's about 377 ohms. That's the impedance of free space. Wow. Okay. And then it goes on to explain it. And there are different answers to this as I'm reading down the results. So, okay. Interesting stuff. Dogwood. That's the next thing up on Google here. So we'll have to answer that question. So thanks, Matt. Any further comments?
Well, if it's 377 ohms, I think it's a fair bet you could work space with a long enough piece of twin lead. You wouldn't need a tuner.
There you go. And when you were talking about, what frequency does the universe resonate at, I was thinking, well, it doesn't, that the planets have resonant frequencies, I believe, which also brought another science fiction author to mind, Kurt Vonnegut. And as everybody goes around, does anybody know what I'm talking about with reference to Vonnegut and resonant frequencies? Back to Matt for final comment, and we'll move on.
I don't remember the resonance frequency Vonnegut connection. And for some reason, my mind is stuck on stranger and strange. But, yeah, it's all interesting stuff. I wondered about that, say that other kinds of resonance frequencies. Well, okay. What do we do? Come along. Here we go. I don't know. I guess I'm not in a very good frame of mind to really think of an unanswered question because part of the internet has sort of answered it back to then.
And I'm going to move on real quick because I did it again. Bob, are you still mobile? KB2RWW. I've done this multiple times when you've been on here, and I should always go to you first. So, Bob, are you still there?
KB2RWW, yes I am.
All right, so let's get your input on here before I read some interesting stuff about dogwood and make a joke about it.
Sure, not a problem. Basically, the answer to your question is yes, it does. However, a lot of people are thinking in the wrong way. Basically, let me drop for a minute. The RF spectrum is very vast and wide. Some of it you cannot see, and some of it you can. When you have fireworks go off, it definitely does go off in the RF spectrum, but in the visible spectrum. But there might be also other parts of the spectrum that it also affects. But those effects have not really been studied as far as I know.
So, from a technical point of view, yes. But if we're referring to the non-visible RF spectrum, the type that we would receive on a radio receiver up to, whatever frequency that we consider radio to end at, that was more what we were aiming for, which I think, and you're somewhat agreeing that the energy is there. It probably is, but it would be difficult to sample. You'd have to have a controlled environment.
That's correct. Such as we kind of listen to hydrogen burning. One of the things that we do in the microwave is we use the sun as a reference I believe it was to judge our gain, even though we're not specifically listening to the hydrogen atom going, but it raises the floor elsewhere because it's such a broad spectrum when it's burning.
Yeah, I've heard that term when you're dealing with science, even in films that talk about it, where they talk about, listening to hydrogen or the hydrogen spectrum or things like that. So that makes a little more sense.
That basically means regardless if it's electrically generated or chemically generated, atoms are moving exponentially, and if you had a way to detect it, you would be able to. That's why they've got the what the heck that super collider thing where they're sampling many different parts of the spectrum.
All right, cool stuff. Enlightens me a little. Expands on the original question. The word dilemma popped into my head. Well, that's a linguistic thing that we'll talk about another night. But all right, Bob. Anything else?
No, that's about all I got, and I am literally a minute and a half from my location, so I will have to secure for tonight. And I'll switch over to YouTube and finish listening out the rest.
All right, Bob. Thank you. Thanks for chiming in, and thanks for the enlightenment there. Cool. This is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science Technology Net. Before we see if Jim is still awake, is this riveting topic may have put him to sleep. I want to read something real quick. Let me drop. The name dog tree entered English vocabulary before 1548, becoming dogwood by 1614. Once the name dogwood was affixed to this tree, it soon acquired a secondary name of hound's tree, while the fruits came to be known as dogberries or houndberries. I'm going to skip a little bit here. Another theory advances the view that dogwood was derived from the Old English dagwood. Dagwood is a form which is unattested. From the use of the slender stems of its very hard wood for making sharp objects or dags, daggers, skewers, arrows. Another earlier name of the dogwood in English is the whipple tree, to refer to the dogwood tree. So this really doesn't completely answer that, but I had to chuckle a little when I read the dagwood part. It says dags, and I'm just thinking about the movie Snatch with Brad Pitt playing the piker, and the whole point of his character being a piker was because he couldn't do the accent correctly. So they had him come up with this crazy accent, basically as a gypsy. And he asks at one point, "You like dags?" And that's the only thing that popped into my head when I read dags. You like dags? And he's saying dogs, but funny movie if you've never seen it. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science Technology Net. Jim, are you still with us?
I think so. Can you be a chance? Yeah, well, the obvious answer is they call it dogwood because cattails was already taken, so they had to come up with something a little different. Yeah, as far as the spectrum is concerned, in the case of an MRI, you put certain molecules in a certain known state, and you excite them with a certain known frequency, and you expect a certain known response back. So you are exciting a certain energy level up, and when it comes back down, it responds slightly. In the case of like a neon sign or lightning or whatever, you're emitting a broad spectrum, and you are exciting multiple energy levels. And each energy level has its own specific frequency range that it is emitting when it comes back down. So it could be visual, it could be RF, it could be whatever. And quite often, like in like your fluorescent lights, it is a UV it when mercury comes back down to the next level. And they put a special phosphorus in that responds to the UV energy and emits a visual light photon as a conversion process. So there's a lot more going on there than meets the eye. With that, I'm going to basically back on out and let you guys talk some more.
That's fine, Jim. And should I not bug you for the rest of the night?
If I see something interesting, I'll bug in or whatever, but I'm kind of wiped.
That's fine. And understood. Believe me. All right. Well, thank you for contributions. And we're going to see if there's anybody else who wants to check in here. This is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Late check-ins before we start a second round. Please come now with your call sign, your name, and your location. All right, that's fine. And as we run through the list again here, there's only two of you now, Jerry and Matt. So, Jerry, you'd be the only other one who might know the Vonnegut reference that I was referring to.
I've read a couple of his, I believe. I'm going to take a stab here just because, it's extraterrestrial. But something about the planet Tralfamadore. I remember seeing a particular actress in that movie, and, well, I like that movie. Way too hard to get back. Oh, no, excuse me. Yes, the 377 holes were keep free space. Yep, I did come to that conclusion. But it has some interesting concepts. Matt, you were running down that road. You might want to look up G-line antennas. That's the letter G, called line. G-line antennas, which is basically G-line comes up to the antenna, and the antenna is a single wire that just extends to free space. And the longer the wire is, the closer the transmitting lobes from the antenna align with the axis of the wire. So, yeah, pretty interesting. They dabbled with it at microwave frequencies. So, I haven't dived extensively into the literature, but yeah, I'm sure that's pretty rich for some antenna stuff, satellite stuff, and maybe backyard playing around. I want to look up and see what's going on there. They'll be way too hard to get back to that.
Well, interesting. Yeah. When you read about some of the alternative antenna technology, what's interesting is there's some companies out there that produce antennas that they swear are based on some science, but they won't tell you what that science is. It's proprietary. There's a company that makes fractal antennas, and they talk about their owner and CEO's research. They produce these things, but they won't actually publish it because they say it's proprietary. That sounds like there's actually science behind it. So, I had a guy once telling me about using the ground as an antenna at certain frequencies, which theoretically would be possible. And he was talking about how the military was doing this to transmit between sites without putting a lot of RF into the atmosphere. I don't know. Wasn't sure if he was serious or not at the time. The Vonnegut reference is from the Sirens of Titan, I believe. And it refers to a creature called the Harmonium. I think that's the name. which at one point the main character and another guy are hiding out, I believe, in like caverns or caves in Mercury, on the dark side of Mercury. And there are these creatures that look like kites, and they live off of the vibrations of the planet. It's interesting. Obviously impossible, but still, it's Vonnegut. Well worth a read. All right. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Matt, anything on the second round here?
Thank you. Yeah, Jerry, I'll look into G-line antennas. I'm always interested in good antennas. Yeah, something I haven't heard of yet. Yeah, I'll check that out. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about antennas. I guess that's sort of a normal camp preoccupation. But, yeah, it made an RF chip. I think it's fine. That's about where I'm at. I'm sorry I'm not very focused tonight. I'm kind of tired. And, like that, but what you've been saying has been making a difference, and I appreciate it, and it's been very interesting. Thank you. KB2, GGS,
All right, Matt, thanks. No problem. And for you and Jerry, yeah, there's a Wikipedia entry on this. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but the G-line is a abbreviation or contraction for Goubau or Goubau line, Goubau. A Goubau or Sommerfeld-Goubau line, G-line for short. And it explains what it is, who invented it, and how it works. So, interesting stuff. And apparently, it was patented. All right. Do we have any late or last-minute check-ins on the net tonight? Please come now with your call sign, your name, and your location. All right, nothing heard. I have no problem with a short net tonight, but let's see, there any final comments from anybody who was on tonight? Please just throw your call sign out.
WA2RGN.
Go, Jerry.
Yeah, well, I mean, since it was touched upon, I think we should not miss the follow-up to the movie Snatch. Lock, stock, and three smoking barrels. Same kind of good rollicking fun. I think it was something else, but of course, time and mind moves on. WA2R gets back to that.
That's okay. And yes, it's just one of those movies I do try to watch periodically. It just always makes me smile. And other than any of the Brad Pitt lines, I think my favorite line from the movie is, "Do you know what a nemesis is?" Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you for the information on dogwood. I think dagwood sounds quite sensible because having saved some pruned branches, drying them, and using the wood, it's a very good wood for that sort of purpose. It's very even dense. So yeah, you could make a dagger out of that. Cool. I think that they have answered my question. Well, now I can sleep. So. Cool. Katie Gucci.
There are lots of like linguistic misnomers. There's so many things that the name of came out of somebody saying something wrong or misunderstanding something. And that's one of them, I guess. One of our favorites that we hear all the time, Pennsylvania Dutch. The Pennsylvania Dutch aren't Dutch; they're German. It's just the residents heard them say Deutsch and turned it into Dutch. So that's one. Another one, a vegetable we talked about on CJ's net, the Jerusalem artichoke, which is a root vegetable. You'll see in the supermarkets, sometimes called sunchokes. They're not artichokes. They are distantly related to them, but the name actually came from a mispronunciation of something else, mispronunciation of another word. Really weird. So there's lots of stuff like that. And yeah, I could also see dogwood having come from Dagwood. And I'm sure if it had happened during the period of time after the movie Snatch was released, it would have made even more sense. So, all right. Any last comments before I close it up? All right. Bob is commenting on the YouTube stream here. I'll just mention before I close out. He said we should all pull out the spectrum analyzers and test the theory. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe get like a patch antenna, something that'll handle some combustion level heat. You put it inside of a metal box with some muffled ventilation and put a couple of sparklers in there. Light them off and get the spectrum analyzer going. Let's see what happens. I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point, but I'm satisfied with the "it probably does" answer. So that's it for tonight. Let's close things out. This has been the OMARC Sunday night, 8 o'clock Science and Technology Net, brought to you by the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club, which owns and sponsors this repeater, the 146-805 repeater, the 805 from Overlook Mountain. You do not need to be a member of the club to participate in this net or any of the other nets, but we do encourage you to join if you are not a member. If you like more information about the club, what we do, and how to become a member, you can find that at omarcclub.org. omarcclub.org. Good job. This club hosts 4 nets on this repeater. Every morning at 8:35 a.m., Paul, ACTUQ, and now I think there are 3 other people joining Paul from the club, host the 8:35 on the 805, which is an informal roundtable style net, not a directed net. Started during the COVID pandemic to allow us to be social. Some of us were needing that socialization. Hams are social creatures, as Paul says, and the original social media, ham radio. So we would make sure that everybody was okay, everybody was communicating. Do we need help? Do we need assistance? And some of us really thrived on that socialization and really helped quite a bit. I know it did for me. Every night at 6:30, a rotating cast of OMARC characters hosts the 6:30 check-in net. Also, a somewhat casual net, but a directed net held by a net control. Same premise as the morning net. What did you do today? Do you need any assistance? Do you have any questions that need answered? Do you need help? And that happens every day at 6:30 p.m. Every Thursday at 8 p.m., our president, Dave, K2GLV, hosts the Thursday Night Technical Net. Net similar theme to this net, but more ham radio oriented. Dave looks for check-ins, and we'll go around with everybody who checked in to see if a subject appears. If a subject does not appear, Dave spins the wheel of topics and comes up with a topic for us to discuss for that night. And that's Thursday nights. And then every Sunday night, of course, at 8 p.m. is this net, hosted by myself and Jim, K2BHM, where we talk about all things science and technology, which could be almost anything. This has been the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. We now return this repeater to its regular use, and as usual, I will end the YouTube stream now and hang out on the radio for 5 or 10 minutes. Good night, all. 7-3. Ending the stream now.
I'm just worried that if you approve fireworks.